Okay, everyone, we are right now facing what's called Shabbat Hazon, named after the Haftarah called Hazon Yeshaya, the first chapter in the book of Yeshaya that we'll discuss as we get on with this class. And Hachamim, as we know from the Gemara, aligned and timed certain parashiot, insisted that certain parashiot precede certain timely parts of our year. And we know, for instance, Nisabim has to be before Rosh Hashanah, and so on. One of them is Devarim. Devarim must always precede Tisha B'Av. Now, we know that it has a special haftarah, as we said, called Hazon Yeshaya ben Amos. But the parasha also is obviously appropriate to Tisha B'Av, and that's why always the Shabbat Hazon, which is Shabbat prior to Tisha B'Av, we're going to read Perashat Debarim. So why is that? What are the similarities between Perashat Debarim and Haftarat Hazon? And why is it so appropriate for us to be reading Debarim? So the book of Debarim actually opens up. The book of Debarim is essentially a monologue of Moshe Rabbeinu. It stretches over the duration of the book of Devarim is 1 month's time, the last month of the 40 years in the desert. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks extensively to Am Yisrael, including in his speech and his monologues, you can say, because he didn't just speak for a month straight. That'd be a rough sermon from a rabbi. Depending on the commentator, some say the book is divided into 3, some say it had multiple speeches in different locations, but the speeches of Moshe Rabbeinu include many mitzvot, some mitzvot that weren't heard before, repetitions of some mitzvot that were taught before. It includes a lot of what you would call musar, direction, guidance, philosophy, and of course, towards the end of the book, it includes a critical berit, another covenant that Moshe Rabbeinu makes, the berit, besides the covenant of Har Sinai, the covenant called Arbot Moab, later in the book, including predictions for the future, curses and blessings, etc. So this book, from Moshe Rabbeinu's standpoint, says it all. And it begins Parashat Devarim. Devarim is the parasha that has no mitzvot in it. But Hanan's already going to have Aser HaDeberot. It has no mitzvot. And it mainly recalls historical events. And it mainly is Moshe Rabbeinu really giving it all to Bnei Israel the way he sees fit. And we are going to frame that approach in a word, and a word that is essentially the reason why Hachamim were insistent that this parasha must be the one read on Shabbat Hazon. And that word is tocheha, which is rebuke. Moshe Rabbeinu chose to begin his send-off speech with rebuke. So different than what we're used to hearing in farewell speeches and send-off speeches from leaders, political leaders, educational leaders. We're used to hearing, guys, it's been great. I love you guys. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, but in the end of the day, it all worked out. Absolutely not. Moshe Rabbeinu's send-off farewell, I love you speech starts with, you guys are off. You've been off. I got to put you on. And that is Moshe Rabbeinu's form of leadership. That's why he's the great leader that he is, because he cares. And a word about rebuke. Tocheha is a mizvat aseh from the Torah. As we see, we read in Parashat Kedoshim, Hocheach, Tochiach Amitecha, Lo Tisa Alav Het. Rebuke is a positive command that has a number of details as to how to carry it out. It's not so straightforward. There is the to whom, the when, the how, the what, the content. of rebuke. Oh, it is a delicate and difficult mitzvah to engage in, but it's a positive command. It's a no choice mitzvah. When in a certain situation, depending on, again, who you are, to whom you're dealing with, and what position you're in and what you say, you're obligated to perform rebuke. And in fact, Hachamim tell us, Im en tochecha, it's from the Gemara, en ahava. If there's no rebuke, there's no love. Very different than the modern way of thinking that mind your own business. Mind your own business. And in today's world, we're so afraid, obviously, the idea of even any type of physical contact is way off. You can be put in jail. And according to halakha and the Torah, and I'm not going to go into the subject now, it's completely not true. But you can't even make people feel bad anymore. In the educational system, it's almost to the point that you give out A's just to make, just not to hurt the psyche and the self-esteem of the students. Absolutely not the Torah's view. The Torah says if you love someone, you care about their direction. If you love someone, you care about veering them off a diversion. When someone goes rogue, you not only put them on the right path, but sometimes when it's necessary, you do it not with kid gloves. Approach is critical. What you say and how you say it is super duper critical. But the fact that you do approach it in a manner that we call rebuke, where you are maybe not always reprimanding, but certainly pointing out flaws, certainly making people conscious of what needs to be changed, all that is within rebuke. The Torah believes in it, the Torah mandates it, the Torah expects it of us. And all the more so, Moshe Rabbeinu, who became the paradigm of Jewish leaders to the nation Israel, who he loves so much and cares for and is so concerned of their future, which he will not include himself in, because he knows tragically he will not pass over the Jordan River to go to Eretz Yisrael. He will not leave this world without doing his duty as a loving, embracing guide and leader, and that is tocheha, rebuke. Now, we have to find how and where in Devarim Moshe Rabbeinu meets out and offers this rebuke. But that is certainly the main reason why Hachamim said Shabbat Hazon Perashat Devarim prior to Tisha B'Av. If we're going to stop this thing, we're going to turn this thing around, if we're going to turn tragedy into celebration, we need to make changes. And to make changes, we need to hear from people that are able and are in the position to tell us what changes need to be made and where we went off. So here he is, Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's talk about what the objectives of his rebuke, before the content of it, what could be the objectives of his rebuke? Again, rebuke can turn someone off if it's not said the right way, the right place and time. But if it's done as prescribed by the Torah Kedoshah, it works wonders. And what wonders was Moshe Rabbeinu expecting to work with the rebuke he offered to Am Yisrael? Well, for one, obviously, it is a deterrent, a discouragement from them to continue in their flaws, to make them conscious of what they were doing wrong, not to repeat, and obviously to inject a dose of fear and bring a little shudder up their spine so that they think twice before committing whatever guilty acts they do again. Number two, despite the fact that there were more than one occasion where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we say in Hebrew, mehayev kiliyah, pronounced and decreed obliteration and annihilation to the Jewish people. And because of the fact that, not for Moshe Rabbeinu, we might not be here today, the descendants might look differently. And despite the fact that we erred and sinned and flawed so many times in the desert, we came out as a nation. We survived. Even the generation who sinned with the spies went on to live 39 more years. We survived. We went on. Hasdeh Hashem, the great unending kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the rebuke tells us that you've done wrong, but God has always done right by you. And number three, it's also a source of encouragement for us. Yes, we're human. We make errors. We're flawed by nature. When we do flaw and make mistakes, it should not be a source of despair, of discouragement, and of giving up. Look at us in this desert experience, how many times we veered off the path, and yet we stuck with it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu stuck with us, and we came out okay, and we're about to enter Israel. Encouragement. Don't get too down on yourselves. Dust off and move on. So all of those are certainly what Moshe Rabbeinu had in mind when he decided that this was the right approach. So we have the first pasuk in the parasha, which famously, Rashi says, hints when it's really it seems like a rambling of listing of places. It says, these are the things Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Am Yisrael, and the Debarim is Lashon Kasher, Hachamim tell us, a harsh tone. And then just list places. Be'eber Hayaden, Bamidbar, Ba'araba, Mosul, Ben Paran, Ben Tofel, V'Lavan, V'Asero, V'Dizahav. None of these places where they're stationed now. They're stationed in what's called Arabot Ma'av, on the other bank of the Jordan River, on the eastern side of the Jordan River. So there are those that say, like the Nasi, that these are the different places that Moshe Rabbeinu visited to give his speech to. But Rashi says, based on Hachamim, that each one of these words in the Targum, in Kelus helps him out, each one of these words allude to different places and different incidents and events where they sinned. And Moshe Rabbeinu starts in this first pasuk, basically punches flying. First pasuk of Debarim, and he alludes to Hayata Egel, and he alludes to the complaining, and he alludes to the sinning by the stone, and the sinning by the place of famine by the river, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Baal Peor is included, complaining about the man is included, all in these words. You can read Rashi and go through them yourselves. That's how he began this book, this monologue, this speech, this approach, not holding anything back. Now, I'll point out a few interesting notes in the content of this rebuke. It's a barrage. And what Moshe Rabbeinu essentially is going to get to highlight the rebuke in this parasha, not surprisingly, is the Het HaMeragelim. Not only to remind them about their sin regarding the spies, but to elaborate, I would say, a lot more than the actual incident in Perashat Shelach. And read it, and you'll see difficult details about Am Yisrael's actions and words during that tragic time that caused the night of crying, which we know traditionally, Tisha B'Av, the first tragedy was the sin of the spies. That is where he's going towards in this parasha. But to get there, he, after the general opening, reminds them of a different incident that at first glance doesn't seem to be a harsh reminder of something sinful. He reminds them, this is starting in Pasuk Yudbet Yud Gimal, where Moshe Rabbeinu said it was difficult to judge you, and we ended up creating a system, a superstructure of judgment with judges per 1,000, per 100, per 50, per 10, and I gave you the protocols of how you should understand and engage in the process of justice in Am Yisrael. And you had your system of setup of judges. That was back in Parashat Yitro with the help of Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, Yitro himself. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes on and speaks about the sin of the spies. Question addressed by many of the commentators is, what is this doing here? What exactly went wrong? It seems like that was a positive, constructive event and change, you can say, transformation in Am Yisrael, the justice system. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu insert that here? But we understand this to be part of Moshe Rabbeinu's approach to rebuke. You can look at this as one camp does, like camp of the Ramban, that there was nothing wrong with the nation, the necessity to set up the system of judgment. Yet this is only a springboard in Moshe Rabbeinu's approach to get to his harsh rebuke regarding the spies. Because the approach of Moshe Rabbeinu, as he reflects back, was, listen, at this point, you had everything. You had the Torah, you had a way of life, you had even a system of justice where everything was basically ready to roll in terms of the mechanics of the nation. And you were right there facing, right now, as a full functioning nation, Eretz Yisrael, and you blew it. And you had to mess it up with Het HaMeragilim. So according to the Ramban and others, this is sort of like a springboard to emphasize the point that they really messed up their opportunities with Het HaMeragilim by first presenting the justice system that was instituted back in post, according to some opinions, post Matan Torah and Perashat Yitro. Or you can be in the camp of the Sforno and others to say that this indeed was a rebuke. And that is the very necessity in that point in time, at least in the desert, of setting up a justice system, of having a superstructure of judges. That is a rebuke, because that was uncalled for. Why? Because we lived a little above nature in the desert. We had a system of sustenance that was supernatural. We were going to enter the land of Israel, engage in a war that is unconventional, a war fought by God. And therefore, the expectancy and the standards at that point was, even though in a normal culture, in a society, a conventional setting of society, where you're going to have people that dispute property and negligence and damages, et cetera, inheritance, et cetera, it was above and beyond you. I expected more of you. I didn't expect that I would have to stand night and day and deal with the disputes and necessitate the system of justice and judgment. It wasn't called for at this time. This was an exalted existence of ours in the desert. We just experienced Matan Torah. We're living in the clouds, literally in the clouds. We have our meals falling from heaven. We're going to engage in a war where you don't have to lift a finger. For goodness sakes, ladies and gentlemen, the fights weren't necessary. The justice system might be something that we expect when we get to the land, but not now. That was the rebuke, according to many, of mentioning the justice system. And after Moshe Rabbeinu goes through this parasha of rebuke, of course, he has a lot more to say to Am Yisrael. But we embrace this parasha pre-Tisha B'Av because we need to hear an earful. And we hear it from Moshe, our leader. However, we hear it in a general way. And this Shabbat, therefore, is not named Perashat Debarim or Shabbat Devarim. It's named Shabbat Hazon. Well, you can say that Haftarot are unique and they're labeled on the day, and that's why it's more understandable to label the Shabbat with the Haftarah and the Parasha. But I also feel that the Haftarah, which is Hazon Yeshaya, was more appropriate to earn the right to have the Shabbat named after it. Because in the spirit and with the example of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshaya HaNabi rebukes the people in a very, very different way, because he's very specific. And he tells them in a poignant, biting, holding nothing back way, these are your specific flaws. And in what might be his first prophecy, and according to some, the 6th chapter is the first prophecy of Yeshaya, but be that as it may, this is the first real harsh rebuke of many from Yeshaya HaNabi. And without going through this entire Haftarah, it behooves us just to get a flavor of this rebuke by Yeshaya, because in it, he addresses generations of Jews for all times and puts us in our place, quite frankly, but also guides us into the changes that need to be made. And really, I can say that this Haftarah more than addressing the Jews who tonight in Tel Aviv, in our nation, unfortunately, will be in discos, and the Jews elsewhere in the world that eat pork or don't observe this coming Shabbat tonight. I think he's addressing us, the people sitting around learning Torah right now. Not because, Chas v'shalom, I have a right to speak harsh words against the observant Am Yisrael, but because Yeshaya HaNabi did. Yeshaya HaNabi was so direct when he told them, Lama li rov zivhachem. Through God through Yeshaya, or Yeshaya in the name of God, says words that we cannot hear. I don't need your korbanot. I don't seek your offerings. Please stop bringing your ketoret, your incense, your sacrifices. They're meaningless to me. I hate your holidays, your Shabbatot. He used the word, Sana'a nafshi, your Rosh Chodesh. They're a burden on me. Stop praying already. I'm not accepting your prayers. This is rough. Now, this is obviously not a call to stop all the rituals and services that the Torah asks us and commands us vis-a-vis our God. But this is to tell us that this is a complete whole religion, ben adam lahaviro, ben adam lamakom. And you can't be an observant, faithful Jew based on divine ritual alone. You need to be godly based on your conduct in this world, in this society. And Yeshayahu goes on to absolutely rip them apart in those areas. And save Yirmiyah, who speaks in the book of Echa, there is no other prophet who screamed out the word Echa. And the Echa word is the word of shock, is the word of how could it possibly be? And he looks at Yerushalayim and the Jewish people, and he says, Hayecha hayata lezona kriyane emana. This was the trustworthy city. This was the place. These were the people that stood for honesty and integrity and morality. These were the people that took care of the poor and the widow and the orphan. This was the people that had a system of justice that put the evil in their place. What happened? Yeshaya HaNavi chose this prophecy, and we choose this prophecy to read about on this Shabbat Hazon of rebuke to deal with Ben Adam lehavero and to speak about our justice system, our lack of integrity, our corruption in matters of money, our lack of ethics and morality in the way we deal with people and our fellow Jew. We can say today that Baruch Hashem, in terms of, I don't love the term social justice, but in terms of social services and taking care of the needy, Am Yisrael is succeeding in a great way with our thousands upon thousands of social service organizations and charitable functions, Baruch Hashem, more than ever in history. Can we say that, and I won't answer this question because who am I, but can we say that about our integrity and our honesty in money matters? Can we say that about our lack of corruption in our dealings? Can we say that about putting the wicked in matter of justice where they should be and having a just society? Can we say that about the morality and ethical behavior of Am Yisrael today? I don't know. I don't think so, because Mashiach would be here if we could. And indeed, Yeshaya ends or partly ends his speech by telling us, or at least we end this haftarah with the famous statement of Sion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shabeha b'staka. No matter how observant you are in your rituals between you and God, and how much you pray, and how much you keep Shabbat on the holidays, and how much you have a relationship with God, in those respects, the only way, says Yeshaya, that we will have redemption is with two ingredients. These aren't the only ones, but these will stop it from coming. Tzedakah, yeah, we're getting there. Mishpat, justice, which incorporates honesty, integrity, morality, ethical behavior in all our dealings. only that Sion, Yerushalayim, Tepadeh will be redeemed. On this Shabbat of rebuke, where we hear the words of Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshaya HaNabi telling us, begging us, guiding us, that this is what we need to get where we need to go and redeem Am Yisrael. We pray that all Am Yisrael, us and all of the Jewish people, take these words to heart and seriously and do what needs to be done to bring our impending Geulah Shleima in the times of Mashiach. Amen. Baruch Adonai Olam.